A marketing environment has two components to it. One is the SWOT assessment, and one is the environmental scanning. The SWOT assessment has an internal assessment, which looks at strengths and weaknesses, hence the S and the W, an external assessment, which looks at the opportunities in the market and the threats in the markets, hence the O and the T. The second component is the environmental scanning, which also looks at factors that are inside the company, the micro, and outside of the company, the macro. So now we will go into a bit more details looking at those two components. So the SWOT assessment, the best way to look at it is from the internal perspective of strengths and weaknesses and the external assessment of opportunities and threats. Then we can divide them, obviously, into positive things, which will be the strengths and the opportunities, and to negative things, which will be the weaknesses and the threats. The strengths are those things that the company have that company can do better than the competition. So if I have good brand equity or good brand recognition, but my competitor also have good brand recognition, that's not necessarily a strength. But if I have a good brand equity and my competitor does not, then this will be a strength. On the other hand, the weakness could be that I might have the price higher than my competition, maybe because I have better technology, like the iPhone. So the fact that I charge more than my competitor, even though I offer better technology, is a weakness. The same goes with opportunities and threats. Threats can be external factors that I have no control over, but that can actually hinder what I can do and what I cannot. Opportunities, on the other hand, are factors in the market that, again, I have no control over, but I can utilize in order to get a better performance over my competition. Environmental scanning has a very similar function, only here we do not divide them into positive and negative, just internal and external. So the marketing environment then will include all the actors and the forces outside of the marketing department that can still, though, affect how marketing can work. So let's see some of these factors. So the microenvironment then will be talking about those factors that are close to the company and can serve the customers. For example, suppliers, marketing intermediates, customer markets, competitors, publics, and so forth. Here is just a nice diagram of how all of these, for example, here we can see customers are one of the things we need to take into consideration. Obviously, we just talked about satisfying customer needs. We can also look at competitors. We just discussed those competitors and to see how they satisfy consumers' needs better or worse than us, and so forth. The next environment we want to look at is the macro environment. Now, the macro environment are those factors that are outside of our reach, but yet still have a large effect on what we can do and what we cannot. So here, this diagram sort of summarizes all the forces. And you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 forces. However, it does not mean that every company needs to take into consideration every force. You only take the forces that are relevant to your product. But let's look at some of the examples that we can discuss. So, for example, what can we do when we have advancing technology? So technology can help us create new forms of competition. For example, when the fax was created, when the cellular phone was created, the internet, that allowed, for example, for Amazon to develop. Before the internet, we couldn't have done that. Virtual reality, consumers can now experience products in a way they couldn't experience before, which again might take the physical retail store out of the equation altogether. We can also create new industries that now can be supplied that we didn't have before. So it affects how people spend their time. For example, you can work and shop from home these days. Again, you can do online shopping as compared to physical shopping. You have social media, so you can communicate, you can give reviews, you can give feedback in ways that you could not have done before. So those are just examples of how advanced technology can actually affect what the company is doing and whether they're doing it better than competition. Let's look at another factor. Within the same self-driving cars. We have a car that drives itself. Will that eliminate the need for cab drivers? Will that eliminate the need for Uber drivers? We have Google's Waymo, or we have Tesla. All of those are advances in technology that actually disrupt consumer behavior. Cell phones, for example, have now facial recognition, and they have augmented reality abilities, so that also affects security and safety. There's different methods of payment now. We can pay online. We actually don't need a wallet anymore. We might not need cash anymore. So all of those will be good examples of the technology. The next factor, which is interesting and many times is being neglected, is actually legal forces and political forces. And one of the good examples is the law that was passed about where people may or may not smoke. One of the main reasons people used to smoke is because of the social coolness or desirability that it reflected, which is why people started to smoke when they were teenagers, then they got hooked, and then it was very difficult to stop smoking. Today, however, there's almost no place you can see people smoking. You're not allowed to smoke in clubs, you're not allowed to smoke in restaurants. Some places you can't even smoke next to a building. That took away the social desirability because nobody could have seen you smoking. That actually was a better force to reduce the demand for cigarettes than the risk of maybe getting some health issues 20 or 30 years ahead. Social and cultural forces has to do with the cultural environment that the company as well as consumers are working at. So, for example, the quality of life. Some consumers expect that they will have leisure time, that will have time to do hobbies. Some consumers expect that they can work everywhere all the time. One of the big commercials that Samsung had was European versus Americans, where Americans are busy, 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 as compared to Europeans. And their idea was to show someone in the pool on vacation still working on their iPhone because, well, not iPhone, on the cell phone, because the cell phone was waterproof. So that is a social culture that might appeal to Americans, but not necessarily to Europeans, which usually when they're on vacation like to stay on vacation and not mix work with vacation. Immigration, women's role in society, all of those actually play a role in social as well as in cultural forces. Then we have demographics, and demographics is one of the big ones because it reflects most cultures as well as most populations. One of the main things is now the aging population. Health become much better in many countries, and people just stay alive longer. So, for example, now we have a lot of products we never had before that cater to aging population, like the pension, retirement. How would you have enough saving to go and have travel around the world when you're 60 or 70 or 80 and so forth? We also have different types of families. We might have single mothers or single fathers. That, again, needs to be catered to, and so forth. And then we have the economic environment. The economic environment is one of the most important ones and usually will apply to most companies. And that will have to do with how much can a consumer pay for a product. If the environment is affluent, then they will agree to pay more for luxury products than if there's a recession or there's not enough money to pay for necessities like food. Nobody will pay $1,000 for a Gucci bag if they can't buy food for their families. However, if they have a lot of money in the sense that it's an affluent market, not necessarily they themselves, but the whole market is affluent, then they will agree to pay more for luxury products.